So again, thank you, everyone. I think all of you know, I'm going to share it anyway. My name is Calvin Chen, and I'm an executive coach out here in Los Angeles. What I do for a living is I work with business leaders and teams who want to take their collective efforts to the next level. And what's really interesting is that, ironically, 95% of the time, it's not about more effort at all. It's actually about trust. It's actually about creating an environment where people can have the difficult but necessary conversations that create stronger bonds instead of hurt feelings, this environment of empathy and shared purpose. So really, it's about creating a sense of belonging in the workplace, why people are able to perform very well and co-create together very well. You see, all of us human beings are wired for belonging. It's just when you reflect on your isolation of sheltering in place during this COVID-19 situation, it becomes pretty clear that we need a sense of community and acceptance in order to be at our best and also to transcend our worst tendencies. So today, since it's still Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, what I want to do is highlight and spotlight how us Asians have belonged in this country just historically. We're going to celebrate some of the contributions that have been made without turning this into a brag fest. And I also want to spotlight some of the historical challenges that we still endure today. Currently, as many of you may know, we're experiencing a spike in anti-Asian aggression across the country because of coronavirus, this so-called Chinese virus that our president has dubbed it. Within 1 month's time between March and April, there were nearly 1,500 incidents that were reported around the country. And some of these assaults were verbal, some of these assaults were physical. There was actually a father and son that are Burmese, but they were stabbed, and the assailant thought that they were Chinese here to spread coronavirus. I mean, that's kind of what we're dealing with right here. It's just one of the many phenomena that cause Asians to, in this country, feel that our belonging is conditional. And really, that's heartbreaking, right? I don't want to turn this into a gripe session, but what I do want to do is to spotlight these challenges because A, they're real, and really, I believe that awareness is unifying. Truthfully, this sort of tenuous belonging is pretty deeply encoded in our story as Asian Americans as far as our place in this country. Now, as I continue, I really want to acknowledge that every community of color experiences a feeling of tenuous belonging in their own ways. I mean, right now there's been a string of 3, maybe 4 incidents that of Black Americans being not assaulted, like killed very unjustly by police officers. And so every community has their own experience of tenuous belonging right here. Even white Americans in this country right now are starting to feel that they're having some level of alienation in this country. So that's the broader social context that we're all living in today. And the question just naturally arises, not if, but how. How does that color our interactions with each other as Americans? How does that color our discourse when there are things that we agree with or that we don't agree with? How does that affect our ability to really create a sense of belonging for each other, with each other? I believe that ultimately, each of us here, whether you're Asian or not, you can do something to rewrite this story of belonging into something that defies the gravity of our history. And as a coach, I have some ideas that I want to share with you on how to co-create that belonging. Okay, so everybody, are you ready for that? Does that sound good? If you're ready for that, let me hear you stay completely silent because your mics are off anyway. Maybe laugh. I know your cameras are off. Perfect. So let's start with some celebrations here before we get into some of the heavier stuff, right? There's really isn't a better way, in my opinion, to start off celebrations other than with food. It's one of my favorite contributions that Asians have brought to America is our cuisine, especially nowadays. In 2020, there's such a broad variety of dishes from around the world that's literally at your fingertips through Google. And to me, it's almost like music for your mouth in a way. There's just something for every mood. I'm talking about, you might be in the mood for like bold spices and buttery tastes, right, of like South Asian cooking. Or you might prefer something that's more gentle in texture and palate, like Japanese delicacy. right? There's Korean barbecue if you're feeling particularly hungry and ravenous, or you might really go for some of just really flavorful foods in Southeast Asian fare with their sauces, their lemongrass, their aromatics, herbs, and Lord knows whatever other magic gets sprinkled in there. Maybe after a night out on the town, you might really appreciate a bowl of just soul-satisfying Vietnamese beef noodle soup, or the simple grandmotherly comfort of a warm rice porridge. It just kind of hugs you from the inside, right? It's very Iron Chef right now, but I think it's probably the easiest way to appreciate a culture is to feel, and to feel what it's like to be them is to experience their food and their hospitality. Because every dish tells a story of geography and heritage and history somehow. Every dish is an adventure and discovery, and usually that adventure and discovery is best taken with an open mind, maybe some trust, maybe some courage, right? But that really helps you to expand your idea of what you think you like and who you think you are. And to me, that's really the transformative beauty of embracing diversity with an open mind, to just try something that's not your usual, right? The second contribution that I want to highlight in this country is something that is a lot less obvious, but a lot more profound. And I'm talking about the Eastern philosophies and practices. So right now, there are countless apps that you can download onto your phone that promise, right, to help you manage your stress, deepen your self-awareness, and expand your capacity for joy through meditation. And at the same time, there are corporate wellness programs that offer yoga like no shame now. They just do it and it's just well accepted, right? And Tai Chi isn't even just for old Chinese men at the park anymore. Literally 2 weeks ago, I saw a Facebook ad by a bearded Caucasian hipster looking dude selling an online course to teach you Tai Chi like online through videos. Like, how awesome is that, right? It was, all of this stuff was considered fringe and new age once upon a time, but science has really proven the benefits of mindfulness just over the last 2 decades. It used to be that only misfits and the hippies would dabble in Hinduism and Taoism and Buddhism, but now different branches of psychology are incorporating all these philosophies into their frameworks, especially positive psychology. And it's really cool because consequently, the different fields of therapy, life coaching, executive coaching, even organizational development have been greatly influenced by these Asian schools of thought. I want to name some ideas that have kind of made it into our American way of thinking right now that I don't think is really from Western thought, but it's a really cool fusion. One of the ideas is that rather than mastering others, it's easier and more fruitful to master yourself. So self-mastery is a big idea here. And also there's this idea that, yeah, results are important, but results are a byproduct. So cultivate your own inner well-being. The golden egg is great, but you need the golden goose to be healthy and happy. So cultivate that inner well-being, right? There's also this idea that you are part of a greater whole. Life is not personal, but it's about us. It's absolutely about us, right? And especially in uncertain times like these right now, I think these ideas and these practices will continue to have a very important impact on the mental health of Americans. Whether you're a celebrity, you're an athlete, you're an artist, stay-at-home mom, some high-powered executive, or something in between, to be able to integrate this American drive for results and action with a more holistic awareness of well-being and self-mastery, I think that can help anybody and even any organization to experience more happiness and more fulfillment, right? So the idea here isn't that like Western thinking versus Eastern thinking, but it's really the synthesis of the two that can allow people to perform at a very high level while still being fulfilled and having an intentional impact in the world. The last contribution that I want to highlight right here has more to do with the blood, sweat, and tears, the work that we've just put into this country through sheer effort. If you trace it all the way back to when Asians showed up in this country, back to the 1700s and the 1800s, we came here and the work that we did was very labor intensive. I'm talking about working on the Transcontinental Railroad, where we did some of the dirtiest, most dangerous and hardest jobs to put this thing together, or even farming in the sugar plantations or the pineapple farms in Hawaii. It was not glorious. And if you fast forward all the way to today, it would seem that we're doing pretty well over here. And I'm just going to name some stats, starting with, just to establish a baseline. Right now, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, we are 5.4% of the entire population. And in comparison to that 5.4% of the entire American population, we have 17.1% of doctors identify as Asian or Pacific Islander. Nurses, about 8.1%. Scientists, the workforce of scientists in America, 20.1% are Asian or Pacific Islander. Out of engineers, between bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs, the average is 15% of these students are Asian. Median household income for Asian Americans beats out even median household income for white Americans. I'm just naming some numbers right here. Educational attainment in America, at least half of Asian Americans over the age of 25 have a college degree. Something like 87.5% of Asian Americans in America have a high school diploma or higher. So when you look at these stats, I think looking at that stats, we can say, hey, I think we've got an A here, right? Like maybe even an A+, Dad, right? And so it's something to celebrate and to look at and be proud of. And at the same time, it's something to be wary of. Because if you only take the surface appearances of this, it's going to appear to justify this model minority myth. And the model minority myth says that Asian people are smart, hardworking, and quiet. And that's why they do so well in this country, where other minorities raise a ruckus and complain about stuff and protest. Asian people just stay quiet and work, and that's why they're doing so well. That's the stereotype. And on the surface, it's like, oh, wow, that's a more, it would seem like a more preferable stereotype to have compared to, right, like the overly aggressive African-American or like the lazy Latino. I don't think that, I'm just naming it, right? But it would seem like it's a more preferable stereotype. But here are some problems with that stereotype. First of all, it's not even exactly true. Remember, the Asian American label is very aggregated, right? If you start to disaggregate the data and you just look at the numbers that way, here are the 5 highest performing ethnic groups in America, according to median household income. So coming in first, we have Indian American, that's $120,000 median household income. And then second place, we have Australian Americans, 91,000. Third place, South African Americans, 91,000. Fourth place, Taiwanese American, 90,000. Fifth place, Filipino Americans, $85,000 median household income. So when you look at these different groups, one thing that struck me was realizing, okay, these are culturally very different groups right here. So to say that it's up to some sort of a cultural superiority doesn't really tell the full story. When you dig into it a little bit further, you start to see that this is how Asians are doing in America is actually very reflective of the immigration policy that's taken place here ever since the 1960s. So before the 1960s, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act all the way back in 1882, which effectively said no more Chinese people in America. And by 1924, immigration from all Asian countries were banned. Asian people in this country who had their citizenship, well, they were stripped of their citizenship. And we didn't allow any more Asian people into this country, not until 1965, because of the work of civil rights activists. These immigration laws changed. And when these laws changed, they started to favor highly skilled, highly educated, and high-earning Asian workers from China, Taiwan, and so on and so forth. So if you think about it, right, if you're kind of skimming from some of the brightest minds in these different countries, you bring them over here because you want them to work at your IBM or your AT&T, like some of these companies where they're going to churn out a lot of patents for you, then of course they're going to do pretty well. Like that just makes sense, right? The other side of it with this immigration law was that they also opened up the doors for refugees to come in from Asia also. So you have a lot of refugees that came from Cambodia, from Laos, from Burma, from Vietnam even. And when you start to look at this data disaggregated, you start to realize that the Asian model minority myth actually really hides the disadvantaged groups inside of Asian America, because Laotians, Burmese Americans, Cambodian Americans, even Pacific Islanders, they don't get the benefit of, let's say, affirmative action policies in college, because Harvard will say, okay, you're Cambodian, but we have plenty of Asian people here, so you don't really get the benefit of that. But at the same time, Cambodian Americans, just to name one of the communities, are having a harder time economically, just systemically. And so they don't really get the benefit of these policies that are designed to help communities that are struggling to get a leg up. Another way that this model minority myth is challenging, beyond the fact that it's not exactly true, is that it tends to drive a wedge between Asian Americans and other communities of color in America, especially right now in a time where we need solidarity the most. Being able to say, hey, Asian people don't complain, why are you complaining right here? It really obfuscates the issues and it creates resentment right now. And that is like the complete opposite of what we need in America, especially in this time. The third way that the model minority myth is not helpful is that it tends to co-opt silence from Asian people to not speak up, because I'm doing pretty well here in America. Who's gonna wanna hear me, Chinese guy, speak up about issues, because other people, it could be said, have issues that are a lot more heinous than mine. So maybe I shouldn't say anything. Maybe I should just keep my head down and keep working at it and not make too much of a ruckus. But what that does though is that keeps me silent about things that are actually happening and things that are real. Because if you ask the question, is it true that Asian people don't experience any challenges in this country? You need to look no further than just what's happening right now around the country because of the coronavirus. I mean, Asian Americans are being refused taxi rides, Uber rides. There's alienating comments by politicians or even on public talk radio. And also people are targeting Asian businesses, at least around Southern California. There are flyers going around to say, don't frequent these Asian establishments. We have to boycott them. The idea that that Asian people are a model minority is something that we get to enjoy in times of peace, but in times of economic hardship, we get to be seen through the lens of the yellow peril, where it's hard to trust Asian people. We are not trustworthy. We're dangerous somehow. And if you look, this goes all the way back to our history. There's been a lot of violence on Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, where we couldn't even raise it up in court because the precedent was set that if you're Chinese, you couldn't testify against a white person in court. And there's so many countless other examples that I would name that would really just be a bummer. So I'm gonna save you that. But I'm bringing all these things up because it really illustrates all of these experiences aggregated together really causes in the Asian American mind for us to feel that we don't belong here. I mean, I know on one hand, God damn it, I demand that I belong because this is my home, but why don't other people see it? We start to develop this story in our own minds because we see that story being expressed to us from the environment that treats us like foreigners. Right? I want to ask you, have you ever felt that your place in this country was tentative? When did you first feel like maybe you don't belong in this society, or maybe other people in this society don't want you here? It's a very alienating feeling, right? The first time I was told that I didn't belong in this country, I was 3 years old. Imagine being 3 years old and being told that you don't belong in this country by your father. My dad told me that I didn't belong in this country because he cared about me and he was trying to protect me. I still remember that night. The look on his face was tired more than anything, but I know he was angry underneath. He was just exhausted. And he told me, Calvin, when you grow up and you go out there, they're going to see your yellow skin. And when they see your yellow skin, they're gonna know that you're not from here. And they're not gonna give you anything in this country. They're gonna be prejudiced against you. If there's anything that you want in this country, the A in your class, the college that you want to get into, the job that you really want to go for, you're going to have to fight for it, and you're going to have to work harder than anyone else in this country. If you want that A, you want that college admission, you want that job. You know what's crazy? I was 3 years old and I didn't ask my dad, wait, Dad, what is college and why do I want an A? Like the Asian upbringing was like already cemented at that point, right? But for my dad to tell me all that, like I really took it as my dad was hooking me up with some knowledge. He was warning me about something, and it put a fire in my belly to go out there and sacrifice things so that I could get mine in this country. What I didn't realize though, was that it also put a chip on my shoulder that just through different experiences in life really deepened that chip. Like I didn't find out that I was Asian really until 8th grade or 7th grade rather, in middle school, when I started getting in fights, right? Cholos would start hitting me up like, where are you from? I'll be like, I'm from El Monte. And they'll be like, no, are you from Asian Boys? It's like a gang. I'd be like, yeah, I guess I'm Asian, you know, and I'll just get beat up. And after a while, you just kind of look around like, what's the difference between, what's in common between me and all these other guys that are getting beat up? Like you're Korean, you're Vietnamese, I'm Chinese. And the only thing that you can really put together is it's because we look the same. It's because we look the same. You know, I'm not bringing all of this up, by the way, to cause everyone to feel like, screw this thing, let's burn this whole thing down, right? That's not the point. But it's to kind of give a context to say, all of us have our own lived experiences based on our own cultural upbringing, and also how other people perceive us, what other people assume about us. And what happens is, if you don't understand the way that I grew up, if I don't understand the way that Black people grow up in this country, or what they experience, by the way, what could happen on accident is we could just trigger people on accident because we don't understand their challenges, their pains, or where they're coming from. So here's what I mean. I want to just ask you to reflect for a moment. Reflect on any relationship where you have felt that you don't really fully belong with that person or with these people. How does that reflect your relationship and yourself, right? You might be thinking about your spouse. You might be thinking about your relationship with your family. You might be thinking about your relationship with your coworkers, or the group at your church, right? But if you think about these relationships where you don't feel like you fully belong, just think about it. What behaviors does that cause you to express, since you have this story and this experience that you don't belong there? As I've worked with thousands of people over the years, and also reflecting on my own experience, when there's no feeling of belonging there, what we tend to see is that people get passive aggressive because they don't feel safe. They start looking out for themselves and watching their own back. There's a sense of resentment. There's a sense of withholding information. Definitely not the team players that we could be, because we don't feel safe. I feel like I need to watch my own back because I don't think you have my back. And what that really creates then is a situation where we can really trigger people on accident, because I don't know what are all the different triggers that you have. So I'll give you an example. When I was working for a personal development company years ago, I had a really good friend on the same sales team as I was. He was going to Thailand for his bachelor party. And so we're sitting around the lunch table, we're very excited about it, and we're just talking to him about Thailand. And then out of nowhere, just very flippantly, very nonchalant, the conversation turned to prostitution in Thailand, and how if you're in Thailand, you may want to watch out for these women that are walking the streets. And suddenly, I could just feel myself slowly fading back in the conversation. I wasn't excited anymore. My peripheral vision was going blurry, and really, I felt a deep anger well up from inside of me, and I wanted to fight. That's why I started pulling away from the conversation. Now, why is that? Why is it that as soon as the conversation turned to prostitution in Thailand, I felt like I needed to fight? Well, you would need to understand my experiences and my story leading up to this point, right? See, as an Asian American, I have noticed, and it's a thing, like we all notice it, that there's this stereotype of Asian men as not particularly masculine, actually quite laughable, actually. But Asian women are hyper sexualized, hyper exoticized. And if you see them show up in a movie, they're included in the movie to be some sort of a sexual conquest for the white man. If you never thought that, or if you never noticed that, look back at these movies, and I think you'll start to notice a pattern right there. Well, I've noticed it. And I have 2 little sisters, and I ain't no punk. I've gotten in fights, I've defended mine, and it's not something that I would just want to let slide. But at the same time, what can I really do about it? I can't cause any of these people to look at my sisters or my mom, my cousins, in a way that is not dehumanizing. That is just a part of the way America has caricaturized us as Asian people. So when you put me in a situation where that conversation was happening, none of my colleagues said, hey, check it out. Calvin's gonna flip the hell out as soon as we start talking about this, but it happened. And there's a wide gulf oftentimes between intention and impact. Here are some other ways that you can just unintentionally trigger an Asian person into wondering, do I really belong here or what? So here's some ways. You can ask me, where am I really from? Hey, Calvin, where are you from? No, where are you really from? When you ask me as an Asian person where I'm from, my first instinct is to say California, Los Angeles, because I, unbeknownst to you, would feel like I need to justify that I'm not foreign. So stop, I'll answer you in a way where it's like, stop asking, I'm from America. But then for someone who's, right, like not Asian, they don't know, they're just innocently curious, like, okay, fine, but where are your parents from? And I'll be like, you outflanked my defenses, fine. My parents are from China. And then if you, as a curious person, innocently curious, are like, oh, that's awesome. My grandfather fought in the Korean War, right? You'll feel like you're trying to relate. And then for me, I'll be like, do you think we all look alike? Can you not tell the difference? And you're not doing that on purpose. But what happens, there's a wide gulf between intention and impact. And if you don't understand these experiences, then you may not understand why the impact is the way that happened. And you'll think that I'm overly sensitive, or you'll think that I'm tripping, or you'll think that Asian people are crazy, right? Here's some other ways that you can do it. You can call me the wrong yellow person's name. You can call me the wrong brown person's name. You can act like what I said wasn't said. You just like silence me, right? I want you to reflect on this. How do people generally respond when they don't feel like they belong, when they don't feel respected or safe? They get either loud or they get quiet. You get violence or you get silence. You get protests or you kind of get nothing. And us Asian people, because of history, because of cultural upbringing, because of our small population numbers in America, we do tend to express it in silence. And that's not really helpful for the workplace. And it's not even and it's not helpful for ourselves or the relationships that we have with other Americans in society. I mean, I think that it's one of the things that has led to the bamboo ceiling. Right? The bamboo ceiling is, so women experience the glass ceiling, where it seems like there's this sort of lid on how far you can rise in your career into the ranks of leadership. Well, Asian people, we call that the bamboo ceiling for ourselves, right? Given how well we're doing it in all these different professions that I just named, Asian people are still just 2.4% of any executive suite in America, on average, 2.4%. So we're really underperforming right there. But that silence doesn't really help.
She says she does. She's like, actually, you're in luck. I happen to. Yes.
I'm going to mute someone right now. Okay. The silence doesn't help either with our lack of media attention, right? You watch the news and they'll be like, well, here's what white people think. Here's what black people think. Here's what brown people think. Next story. And it's hard to be heard when they're not even included in the news. And it's kind of hard to raise our voices about that because the population size is so small, so on and so forth, and the model minority myth. But here's what's really pernicious about it also. In our silence, other people don't know where we stand. In our silence, people don't know what we care about. If they don't know our stories, they assume that we don't have the stories. And so when we have our reactions, they're kind of like, where the hell did that come from? If people don't hear from us, there's a trust that's not being built. And it's not good enough. It's not enough to just be nice and to be pleasant if people don't feel and understand our presence. I mean, all of this really I think reinforces our own predicament in this country. Now, it should be, I think, acknowledged also, we didn't come here to belong. So it's not like we're doing a poor job of belonging. We just didn't really come here for that. All of our ancestors that came here really came for the economic opportunity or to escape hardship in the country back at home in Asia. I think every American came here for either economic opportunity or to escape hardship, with the exception of probably African Americans. They were just brought here against their will, right? So, but for all of us that are here, we came here for the transaction pretty much. And I think in 2020, all of us are realizing that even if we're doing well transactionally in this country, which was the original intention, it's just not enough to be doing well transactionally, but not feel like I'm home in a neighborhood or country where I call home. It's not enough to be doing well when I feel like I need to justify my place here. And I can't even tell you that I'm from Asia because I need to tell you that I'm from America somehow. You know what I mean? And so in order to move forward from here now, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to say, okay, I need to take care of that transaction for myself and do well in this country. And at the same time, it's time to intentionally co-create our belonging with each other. The idea is that belonging is not something that I can really demand for myself. It's something that I create for others and others create for me. When gun violence was a very big part of the conversation, because we had that whole string of shootings. You guys may remember that, right? A lot of Americans felt like they needed to be safe. And so the way to be safe was to buy more guns. And the truth is that you can't have enough guns to feel safe in this country, because safety is something that on one hand you do for yourself, but on the other hand, it's something that the people in your environment grant you to say, you know what? I care about you. You know what? I have your back. You know what? You're safe with me. You know what? If anything seems to be happening, I have your back. Belonging is something that we co-create. Historically, where we have found belonging as Asians in this country, and it's just different communities of different colors in this community, is within ourselves, right? There are Chinatowns all across America. Why? Because once upon a time, we weren't treated like we belonged here. So we kind of retreated to our own ethnic enclaves. So that's why there are Chinatowns, there's historic Filipino town, there's Koreatown. It was just a place where we could be us with each other. But in 2020, with all the tensions happening, I feel like it's really time for us to go outside of our communities and build belonging between black and yellow, white and yellow, brown and yellow, black and white, brown and black, and just go in between, because either we're living up to the American dream or we're living the American nightmare. And it's a choice that all of us have to make. So my challenge to all of you, your mission is to find your way. I have some ideas to share, but my mission for you, my challenge to you, is that you now have the opportunity to find your way of how do you rewrite our story of belonging in this country as Americans. It's easy to be cynical about the situation and say, well, shouldn't it already be great? I don't know if it should. Like, it should, like, we want that. But at the same time, when Martin Luther King had that dream in the 1960s, it was a dream from the future. America had never been this post-racial society, and it still isn't. We're moving in that direction. And now at this point, because we're alive, it needs us. I think it really needs us. So my brothers and sisters, if you're with me on that, I want you to just reflect now, right? Okay, it's fine. So if I am to take on this calling to say, I'm going to co-create belonging with my fellow Americans somehow, just reflect first of all, right? How is belonging expressed? Whatever we need to do to create that belong together, how will you know when we're in a place where we really have a good belonging with each other? The best that I've been able to distill it after talking to a lot of clients, a lot of people in general, is that when you belong, you feel seen, you feel heard, and you feel understood. You know that your input is welcome and it matters. Unless you don't want to give the input, right, Nancy? Maybe you just want to sit by the window and look at the trees. That's totally fine. But as soon as Nancy says, hey, I'm experiencing something. Hey, I have something I want to share. We're like, okay, glad. Yes, thank you, Nancy. Let's hear it. You feel like you belong that way when your input matters. In a space where your input doesn't matter, then the only thing valued about each other is our output, and that's just transactional. So there's a couple different things that I want to suggest that we can do here. Given that I was talking about the coronavirus racism, right, and the hate crimes against Asian Americans in public lately, there's a link that I want to share with all of you. It's from the allamericans.us website. And these are resources for combating or confronting anti-Asian ignorance or even anti-Asian aggression in public. So there's like the 5 Ds of being a bystander. You can distract, you can delegate, you can delay, you can document. Forget the 5th D in the moment right now. You can, if you're having conversations with people and you notice that it's not like an aggression, but there's just some ignorance right there that could lead to discrimination. What you can do, teaching tolerance teaches that you can interrupt the person, question the thinking or the behavior, educate them on how that thinking is flawed and harmful, and educate them on a better way. You can echo positive messages. So there are different resources out there that'll teach you how to specifically combat racism and aggression in public. I've just included a link in the chat box right now, so you guys can click on that and you can look through the resources there. That stuff asks for a lot of courage. And so I'm just going to leave that there and then trust that you'll do with it what you will. What I want to talk about and suggest in this talk, the idea that I want to present, hopefully is more accessible. I think it's still scary, but it's the idea that we can have conversations with each other so that we can just understand each other's stories, each other's experiences, and each other's perspectives, especially in a time where it's probably hard for them right now. Like, I just reached out to an old client before this call. She's African American, and given the latest string of killings, like unjust killings across the country, I know how I felt about it. I wanted to know how she felt about it. And through the conversation, it was just, I think, a very beautiful moment of connection where at the end of it, she felt that I had her back. And that, you know, she wasn't, I don't think she was losing it, but it's something that obviously is going to leave you distraught. But I was able to reach out and create a sense of belonging that way. And so I feel good about that. I feel now I'm more in the mix and in the fold and doing something where I'm creating belonging with other Americans along the way. And I think that's something that all of us can do, right? Another example, I'm going to bring back, I'm going to finish the story with my coworker from earlier. So that happened, that conversation about Thailand and prostitution, right? Well, I couldn't work for 3 days and I was commission only. I couldn't focus on selling, even though it was my livelihood, because I was that pissed. I was that triggered. What was hard was that in my mind, I knew better than to think that my colleagues said those things on purpose to trigger me. I knew that it was just some level of ignorance, but I couldn't fight how I felt, which was that I needed to protect my own kind somehow. And it was just a really disorienting experience to feel differently than what I knew. So ultimately, I had to have an uncomfortable conversation with my colleague. I approached him, we sat down, and I asked him, hey, can we talk about this? I don't know any other way to resolve this challenge right now. He hesitated and he said, sure, what's up? So I proceeded to share with him about the conversation that we had in the lunchroom just 3 days ago and how it triggered me and how I kind of distanced myself ever since then because I haven't known how to approach it. Part of me wants to fight. And he was like, whoa. What he did a really good job at was he just listened to me. He didn't say, wow, you are tripping. That is not my intention at all. You need to handle that on your own. He asked me, where does that come from? Like, help me understand. He assumed that I wasn't crazy, and he assumed that there was a good reason for me feeling the way that I did. And when he asked me that, I felt very uncomfortable because now was the time for me to share my racial insecurities with my white friend. And so I did. I shared with him the stereotypes. I shared with him my anger. I shared with him how I felt like I needed to protect my sisters, but this wasn't something that I could really protect my sisters or my mom or my cousins from. And my friend's a white dude, but the color was leaving his face as I had this conversation with him because he was so embarrassed and I was so embarrassed. Clearly that was not his intention and he apologized as much. And for a couple seconds, we were just sitting there in this bowl of awkward soup, silent with each other. And he reached out to me after a couple seconds to say, hey, is there anything that I can do for you? Is there some way that I can make up for this? And in that moment, I realized I didn't need anything from him at all. I just wanted him to understand. I just wanted him to feel me, and he did. And you know, what's really cool is that incident, before that, we were great friends. But after that, our relationship just deepened to the point where the following week, he was sharing sales strategies with me and time management strategies with me on how he was performing so dang well in sales. And on one hand, I was very grateful. On the other hand, I just thought to myself, you were holding out on me this whole time? Right? It's amazing the level of disclosure and sharing and the sense that I have your back and I'll go the extra mile for me, even if it doesn't serve me, when we can create that sense of belonging with each other. So for my Asian people in here, my challenge to you is to find your ways and moments to speak up. Share your story, share where you're coming from, share the impact that you feel, but assuming positive intention from your colleagues, from your fellow Americans. A lot of times, earlier I said there's a wide impact between intention and impact. It's important for you to share your impact, but if you can do it in a way where you're not assuming that the other person has bad intentions, then that really goes a long way toward a healthy dialogue. And if you can have that conversation with a positive intention, where in your mind, you don't go to this story of, oh, that happened, therefore I don't belong. You go to this place where it's like, hey, that happened, and therefore this is that moment where I step in because I can create belonging right here. Then you really can, and you really become more of a leader in that moment for your own belonging, but also for your relationship with your colleague, with your friend, with your neighbor. And so on the other side of this, if you're on the receiving end of one of these conversations where you're hearing someone through their story and their impact and their challenge, my word of advice there is that this is not the time where you defend yourself. This is just the time to listen and help the other person to feel heard, help the other person to feel seen, and help the other person to feel understood. I'm going to pop this into the chat box right now. There's a model of dialogue. There's a modality called imago dialogue. It's used for couples in couples counseling and therapy. So if this is a way of communicating and listening that can help people rescue their relationship from the brinks of a divorce, I think it can help us. I think it can help you. As a coach, I've seen it be very helpful to helping people create belonging with each other in the midst of conflict. And I guess that's really the idea, is that these moments where there's a potential conflict right here, if we can approach conflict as co-creators as opposed to adversaries, then we really have a chance right here, because there's conflict everywhere in America right now. And what it really needs is for us to be willing to bridge this gulf. Now, in bridging this gulf, what I just named is not easy. You're going to have to overcome your own sense of judgment about the other person. You're also going to have to overcome some sort of a cynicism that you might have about white people, about yellow people, about brown people, and not assume the worst, so that you can see things through their eyes, but still communicate what it is that you feel. You're also going to have to overcome your fear that having this conversation is going to be a waste of time, or that having this conversation is going to be a blow up. Because if you have the intention that this conversation is to establish a mutual understanding and a mutual respect, I trust that you're going to be able to do that, even if it's not easy. If you want, please reach out to me. I have so many great books, dialogue models, and all that to share, because that's what I coach on for a living, right? But that is my task that I want to challenge all of you to do, is to overcome your judgments, your cynicisms, and your fears, so that we can have these conversations that are pretty nakedly uncomfortable. We have to really go out of our way to create belonging outside of our communities. But I think if we can do that, that really starts to lead to a stronger America overall. And it's Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and so I'm saying do this for Asian people, and Asian people do this. But overall, my message is that let's do this for Black people. Let's do this for brown people. Let's do this for white people. Let's do this for people. Let's do this for Americans, right? Because it's a crazy time in America right now. Our politics, our social discourse, social media is not very fun right now. It's all just heavy, right? But if we can practice this with each other, then beyond how this can benefit society, what I'll promise you is that it will really benefit you as a human being. The day that I decided that wherever I go, I am a source of safety and I'm a source of belonging for other people is the day that I became a leader in big ways and small. I swear life changed for me so much as soon as I just decided that I was a source of safety for people, because then people could open up, then people could share, then I could help people to feel heard and understood. Then I could find ways to help, or then I could connect people to a resource. If I couldn't help at all, at least the person felt like they were cared for, and that's oftentimes all we really need. I didn't need anything from my colleague. I just needed him to feel like I understood. And that deepened our relationship on its own. And we had more of a sense of connection just because of that alone. And that's what I want to ask from you. That's what I really believe that our country really needs right now. And that's the country that I want my children to grow up in. My dad first told me that we didn't belong in this country when I was 3. And ever since then, I've seen ways that he was right, but I've also seen ways that he was very wrong. The truth is, we've made great strides in this country. I mean, we went from my dad telling me that I don't belong in this country out of his need to protect me to just a couple months ago, I was watching the Democratic presidential debates with my son and saying, Iro, look at that. There's an Asian man running for president. One day you can be that. It's quite amazing, right? We've made some great strides in this country. And I really believe that outside of this coronavirus spike in hate crime situation, it's really the best time in American history to be Asian or Pacific Islander. The truth also, though, is that we have plenty more work to do. You only need to turn on the news to realize that. So that's my challenge to you all. It's a challenge that I also take very personally myself. You know, Iro is 2 years old, or almost 2 years old now. We have Leslie and I have a daughter on the way. She's going to be born sometime near November. You know, soon it's going to be my time, right, to have my Mufasa and Simba moment. This conversation about what life is going to be like and where's his place in the Pride Lands, you know? And I'm going to tell my son, I'm going to tell Iro, hey, you're an American and no one can take that from you. There's so many people from around the world that have worked so hard to make this country amazing. And I can't wait to see the contributions that you make to America. You can be and have anything that you want if you're going to give it your all, get better each day, and help others along the way too, because you are an American. You need to act like it. When I tell Iro that story, to me, that's me rewriting our story of belonging with my next generation. All the conversations with colleagues, with friends, with neighbors, with other people in society that I know it's going to be a hard conversation, but I approach with curiosity, I approach with empathy, I approach with courage. That's me rewriting our story of belonging with each other in my own life now. Every one of those conversations helps me to overcome my own story that we don't belong here. My question for you all now is, how will you do it? What is your way of rewriting your story of belonging in this country so that you're a source of belonging for yourself and for others in this country? Thank you so much for giving me this space, my friends, to hear this message. I'm very blessed that you all are here. Thank you so much.